Man, what happened to us? How did we get from guarded intimacy to global exposure? From mystery to mass consumption? How did something once hidden behind closed doors become the wallpaper of modern life? There's a real story here. It's a historical shift that didn't just happen overnight. It's actually a cultural revolution. Let's call it a cultural decay that started decades ago, and it's crept its way into every corner of society these days. And what once required courage, shame, and secrecy to access now takes a swipe of a finger. It's pretty crazy and sad, but today we're going to talk about the rise of pornography in modern history. If you wanted to access adult content in the mid-20th century, you had to work for it. You had to walk into a store and actually face another human being to buy a magazine or a VHS tape. That's all that was really available back then. And that in and of itself was the barrier. You had to be a certain age and you had to have the willingness to do it. And there was kind of an accountability factor, like these people knew what you were doing. Even if that accountability was minimal, it's not like they were going to go tell your wife or something, but this is where it started, okay? So there was a culture earthquake in the 60s called the sexual revolution that hit America like wildfire, and it fueled a mixture of rebellion, the birth control pill, and growing distrust of traditional morality. So what began as freedom quickly became a commercial empire. So in California in the 60s, adult theaters began to appear. And by 66, the first Pussycat Theater opened its doors. And this was marketed as like an upscale alternative to the seedier, kind of crappier, lower scale cinemas that were popping up. They were kind of gross. Like people were making love with themselves and others in the theaters. It was bad. So this Pussycat Theater was more upscale and better standards, but within decades, these theaters had spread across the country. There was roughly about 750 of these theaters operating by about mid-1970. So at the same time, we also had the rise of Playboy and Penthouse magazine, and this transformed adult content to something dirty and hidden to something glossy and glamorous. They packaged lust as luxury, sensuality as sophistication, and objectification as empowerment. It was no longer Dark City in a corner. It was now a subscription on your coffee table. And here's where it gets crazy. From magazines to the machine, how the internet changed everything. What was once limited to a physical magazine or video store has now become an endless digital buffet. Today's high-speed internet pornography is an entirely different animal from what it was 50 years ago. It's designed to be infinite, scrolling without end, with every imaginable category, scenario, and algorithmic suggestion that's built upon the desire to capture attention and hijack your brain's wiring circuitry. So the average age of first exposure in America is around 8 years old, okay? That means millions of kids are seeing explicit content before they've ever even had a single real romantic experience. And porn companies know this. They intentionally target young people because addiction forms easily in the brains that are still developing. And once you have an addict young, you have an addict for life, usually. So we used to think that heroin was the great destroyer of potential, and it absolutely is, but also now we have the dopamine spikes that are hitting all the young people in this generation. So this is kind of a interesting beginning, but let's look back at Hollywood and the bedroom marital scene. It's easy to forget that there was a time when Christian leaders and even many secular moralists fought to keep sex scenes and marital scenes of the bedroom out of movies and TV. In fact, up until the mid-1960s, there was a strict moral code called the Hays Code in Hollywood. You can Google that. And this forbade sexual activities being displayed or nudity in movies and TV. And all this changed in about 1965. There was a lighthearted sitcom called The Monsters, and they broke the rule. At first, it was very small, but it was a symbolic barrier showing that a married couple was in the same bed on TV. And this was just a little clip, but it's a novelty for its time. And from there, the walls came down fast. And what Christians once called off limits became mainstream, as we can see today. So by the 1980s, sex was an expected ingredient in entertainment. By the mid-2000s, it was a selling point, and now it's everywhere. It's on regular TV, not just adult late-night TV or adult content videos. We are so desensitized and hypersexualized, it's crazy. But now let's look at the science behind it, because pornography is not harmless. There's actually science behind this. This isn't just a moral claim, it's a neurological fact. So every time you view pornography, it triggers a flood of dopamine, and this rewires the brain's reward system over time. Your brain adjusts to this artificial high, if you will, and what used to excite you now stops working. So now you need more novelty, more content, more extremes, more stimulation to reach that same level of pleasure. And this is the same mechanism behind drug addiction. It's that thing in the brain that's telling you, I want more. And the result is desensitization, not just to an image, but to real people, and to real intimacy, and to real connection to humans. And masturbation tied to pornography amplifies this issue tenfold. It rewires your brain to bond with pixels instead of people. And instead of forming deep relational connections, your mind creates pathways to instant gratification. So eventually, real human relationships can feel awkward, dull, and demanding compared to the instant, on-demand fantasy that you've been living. And this isn't sexual freedom. This is bondage disguised as pleasure. So let's look at the cycle of numbness. At first it feels harmless. You tell yourself it's private, nobody knows, this is stress relief, I'm upping my game sexually, it's better than other options. But soon the same videos just don't hit the same way, you know? You scroll longer, you explore darker, more taboo categories, and you tell yourself at first that you're just curious, it's not hurting anybody. But in reality, your brain is chasing the next high and making it further and further out of reach for you. So each click makes the real world feel less satisfying. There's like this hyper, I can't think of the word. There's like a hyper realism factor in there that you just don't get with the real world. And pornography doesn't just affect the brain, it also affects the heart. It creates emotional distance, it erodes empathy, and it trains you to view people as objects instead of souls. You might think it's helping you cope, but in reality it's reinforcing loneliness and false intimacy. So let's talk about breaking the illusion. I, like so many others, have believed the lie that porn would make me feel more experienced or more confident or more in touch with my sexuality. But in reality, it made me feel more disconnected from myself and others. My wake-up call came when I read this book called Your Brain on Porn by Gary Wilson. Changed my life. I'd struggled with it on and off, had seasons of victory, seasons of failure. But I heard this book, and he's not telling you to stop pornography. He just gives you a lot of testimonies of men struggling with it, past, present, and future. Or not future, but past and present. And just like, yeah, it's a total wake-up call when you hear all these other people struggling with it, and then the neuroscience laid out behind it. And he talks about like the dopamine pathways and how the brain actually heals once you stop feeding it artificial pleasure, because our brain is plastic, or has a plasticity and can always be changing. Neuroplasticity, that's the word I'm looking for. So that knowledge shifted something for me. I made a commitment to myself to never go back, and I've kept that promise for the longest I've ever kept it, over a year now. It's been amazing, but I feel like I finally realized what it was costing me, like my inner heart, my private time, my imagination. Like, I want to give that all to God, not some fake thing that's not real and not helping me. So this wasn't necessarily easy, but it was possible with the help of the Holy Spirit. And now I have my focus back, my peace, my joy, and I don't have to like wear a mask of like, oh yeah, I'm sinning in secret, but we don't have to talk about that because God's grace, So anyway, the cultural fallout of this is that we now live in a hyper-sexualized culture where everything from marketing to movies to social media is designed to stimulate rather than to satisfy. Like, there's so many thirst traps out there. I hate seeing them. They're annoying and stupid. But they also come across my feed, and I have to figure out what to do and guard my own heart. So your attention is basically the new currency, and sexuality is a valuable commodity. A lot of people do that. I think it's gross, but I also understand the struggle for sure. I just think the price is too steep, and a generation of men and women are being desensitized and getting more into loneliness and disconnected and unsure of what real intimacy even feels like anymore. So the truth is, we've been groomed not by a person, but by a system, one that profits off of our impulses, exploits our boredom, and rewires our desires before we're old enough to understand what's even happening. Like I said, the first exposure is typically around 8 years old. So some final reflections and a couple questions. We were not made to consume, we were made to connect. We were not made to numb, we were made to feel. We were not made to grasp at things, we were made to give. The journey out of addiction, any addiction, starts with truth. And the truth is, hypersexualization has not liberated us. It's enslaved us to an endless appetite. But awareness is the beginning of change. So let's ask ourselves, how has the culture shaped what I believe about love, sex, intimacy, and worth? What am I actually looking for when I open that tab and scroll that feed? And who could I become if I stopped letting my desires be programmed for me? So it's time to step out of the fog, not in shame, but in awareness and in truth. Because once you see the system for what it really is, you start wanting something real. And that's people, that's Jesus, that's relationship, that's love. And that's God. So thanks for watching, everybody. God bless you.